I think that having AI in our security tooling has been such an integral part of Microsoft's security ecosystem for years that some of the features I mentioned, whether that's UAVA or data loss prevention that have built-in machine learning, hopefully are more familiar. But the securing AI piece is really new, and it is based on what we've seen at this real explosion of GenAI applications. I was thinking about how to frame this today, and I thought that doing it through Zero Trust would actually be quite interesting. Again, I support the US government, and so on the DoD side of the house, we've just seen Zero Trust explode from the mandate coming out of the CIO's office that by 2027, all agencies will have to meet a baseline level of Zero Trust. Since then, I've also seen that outside of the DoD, the demand for Zero Trust principles to guide the security story has been incredibly important. And so I want to talk a little bit today about how we can use these Zero Trust principles to accelerate the securing AI story and how in turn that actually puts us in a better place when we think about the Zero Trust journey over time. So I think that we sometimes overextend on what it means to protect generative AI. I think it sounds extremely daunting since this is somewhat new for all of us. And I think at the end of the day, I do want to just ground us and say that we need to remember that when we think about the security of GenAI applications and all of its related components, we can think about it the same way we do traditional apps and infrastructure. So we need to think about things like, is our data secure through the AI lifecycle? Who can access our AI models and data? How do we protect these applications from threats? And that's very similar to conversations we have around traditional application security. So when we think about AI risks, I think I've spent quite a bit of time talking about the secure AI challenges, right? So these are things that we've already seen. So data exfiltration, which can happen via prompts or via tooling. This is one of the bigger risks, which is that if a user or an attacker uses prompts or AI tools to extract sensitive information that should have never been exposed. And this is where Purview and Defender for Cloud Apps can come in that I mentioned earlier. We're also seeing remote code execution. This has been increasing as AI agents and plugins are becoming more powerful. We're trying to avoid them being used in unintended ways, and Copilot can help with this significantly. We also see that adversaries are trying to extract model weights or system designs to replicate or misuse or tamper with your AI systems. And so there's a lot we can do here with Defender for Cloud that helps us monitor suspicious patterns that could indicate that there's probing happening on the model. And then prompt injection attacks, I think, have been very aggressively highlighted recently, where basically users can craft inputs to override system instructions. And so this is something that we're also working on through Defender for Cloud Apps and some of the other tooling that I mentioned earlier. The one piece that is also very important to us at Microsoft is the responsible AI notion. And so this is not as much an outright security risk, but this is when we think about things like hallucinating content, when we think about creating content that is biased or offensive or harmful. For us at Microsoft, we want to make sure that there's trust in everything that we do. And we are very adamant in making sure that we have the right safeguards in place, that we're grounding everything with real data, that we're using things like RAG, and we're thinking about responsible AI in a really meaningful way, because that's just as important to us as the security side of the house. So I think that in order to make kind of some of this AI security a bit more close to home, I wanted to frame it in the same way we think about cloud, which is just that shared responsibility model. And security is a shared responsibility. We all know this. It's very similar to traditional cloud computing, where no single entity is going to own 100% of the risk. In AI, this model becomes even more nuanced, because you're not just dealing with infrastructure, right? You also have to think about the data, the models, the applications, and always the most challenging, which is the human behavior. So at the foundation, as the cloud and AI service provider, Microsoft is responsible for securing the platform. And that includes things like protecting the model infrastructure, ensuring the security and compliance of all of the endpoints that Azure OpenAI might run on. We are also responsible for patching and hardening the environments that host these models. And we also want to make sure that all of our tooling, whether that's Copilot or something else, is built with security and compliance and privacy by design. Despite that, customers still have significant responsibilities here. So the customer is going to control what data is put inside these models. They also control who has access and under what condition. The biggest responsibility I see on the customer side is also around monitoring and policy applications to make sure that that usage is in line with your business workflows. And then we also see developers as part of this equation, right? Because they might be fine-tuning models. They might be using Copilot Studio to build their own custom models. And so when we think about shared responsibility, that doesn't at all dilute the responsibility. There's still a big part for all of us to play here. And at Microsoft, we're very committed to doing our part to making this as secure as we can. And so if we go back to what I kind of started the session on, which is around using AI in alignment with zero trust principles, I'm sure everyone is familiar with zero trust, which is really anchored on three things: assume breach, use least privilege, and verify explicitly. And so very similar to security and AI, when you think about AI and zero trust, there are the two angles, right? There's how can you secure all components of AI with zero trust principles? So how can you understand the use cases of your application? Who has access? A lot of this comes with understanding your own risk tolerance, but then you also want to use AI to enable and accelerate zero trust. So you want to think about how AI can help detect and block threats and make you more efficient in resolving the gaps that you have in your zero trust posture. And I think that given the massive commitment, not just from the DoD, but across a lot of our customers to having more zero trust reliant architectures, and the push and increase in scale of AI applications, putting these things together is actually a great way to think about it. And so not only do we need the zero trust principles to drive safe, responsible, secure AI usage, but in turn, that's also going to accelerate our zero trust journey. And this is where I think zero trust becomes really essential. As we talked about at the beginning, generative AI introduces continuous change and, quite frankly, disruption, which is very powerful for innovation, but very difficult when we think about legacy approaches. Because zero trust assumes breach, because we think about verifying explicitly every single time and policies like least privilege, when you apply that to AI, it means really locking down your posture. So we start with people and we think about the fact that we need to educate our teams to use AI responsibly. We need to use tooling around identity to have strong identity management, to have strong conditional access so that we know who's using these AI tools. Data obviously remains incredibly important. We need to protect that data. As I talked about with Purview, we're going to use Purview to classify that data, to label it, to govern it. And we're going to do this automatically so that before the user even starts engaging with this generative AI tooling, the data has already been cleaned up. And then going back to Defender for Cloud apps, we're going to use that to get visibility into all of your AI usage, whether that's sanctioned or unsanctioned. And then through machine learning powered tools like data loss prevention, we're going to make sure that only the data that makes sense is going into the prompts that these tools are using. And then, of course, protecting the infrastructure remains incredibly important. This is where Defender for Cloud comes in that I mentioned. It's going to help us understand if there's unusual activity. It's going to help us make sure we have secure configurations from the beginning. And then finally, the monitoring comes with Microsoft Sentinel that helps us understand how this AI is being used. It helps us see anomalies, again, with machine learning, and we can use it to flag threats in real time. When we think about Copilot for security, we can bring that in to do quicker investigation and to get faster remediation and have a stronger security posture holistically. And so we know that generative AI cannot be secured with old paradigms. I talked about that at the beginning. There's just too much change. But when we apply zero trust, we can secure this future of AI, but we can evolve at the same speed of innovation so that we don't have to turn off tooling because we're worried about the security posture. So if you bring that all together, including some of the products I talked about earlier, you can see it across usage, applications, and the platform here. So you can see how we're using Purview to categorize our data to make sure that we're not accidentally leaking sensitive data. We use Defender for Cloud that you can see next to Purview to make sure that that underlying infrastructure is secure. We have a high dependency on Defender for Cloud apps to track that usage and to have visibility into your shadow AI over time. And all of this is coming together through a really holistic end-to-end ecosystem. This is not about protecting AI with one product or one tool. This is an extremely layered approach that thinks about each part of the stack so that you can innovate at the scale of AI without any fears of introducing additional risk into your environment. And so as we wrap up, I kind of wanted to talk through 5 core concepts that can really be the anchor for any AI security strategy. These are really practical things that I've kind of learned through customer conversations that can help organizations navigating this space. As always, the humans are the most important part. And so user training is the beginning. AI is intuitive. I'm sure we've all found, even my parents tell me like, oh, I use ChatGPT for my board minutes. But secure AI usage is not. And so we need to make sure that employees have very clear guidance on what's safe, what's risky, and how to use AI responsibly. And you need to do that through education. Data access obviously is increasingly important since that is the oil through which we are running all of this generative AI tooling. So we need to know where the data is, how sensitive it is, who's allowed to use it. Data does not change just because it is being used by AI, but AI definitely magnetizes where our sensitive data is, and we really need to get ahead of that. When we think about shadow AI, that's just increasingly important for us to have visibility. And so that's where we think about app controls and understanding how employees and users are using third-party tooling. And then AI model controls is just really about owning your AI. Transparency, versioning, clear boundaries around what models can access and how they behave is incredibly important. And then the AI operations are continuous, right? So we need to have ongoing monitoring, ongoing logging, auditing, tuning. So the big thing to take away with this is that AI security is going to need to become a foundational piece of your core security strategy. And this is something we need to start building in immediately into all of our security postures so that we can empower everyone to innovate and defend at the speed and scale of AI, again, without opening an additional area for attack. So these are just some recommendations I put based on where you may be in your GenAI journeys. It's always good to see where it's being used in your org to get that visibility. Regardless of if you're using generative AI tools or not, you will one day. And so think about your data and make sure that you're classifying it and protecting it. When you see AI related behavior and when you get that visibility, we need to be monitoring it over time. So these are extremely agile programs. And then finally, this is not something that just affects compliance teams or just affects data teams. We need to be collaborating across groups so that we can really have a holistic story here. And then I'll close by saying that there are a lot of certifications that we offer at Microsoft to help drive a deeper understanding of this tooling. And I put those here. I'm happy to share the deck after the fact.